Welcome back to 209 Sports. We're here again today with Grant Winters and Scott Bryant. We're going to jump into a few different topics today, but kind of touching on the same things we've kind of been visiting the last two podcasts. The COVID environment is changing, not rapidly, but it is changing. There's some evolution, and there's some new information that's out there, and some new design, I guess, for how we're going to proceed. So we'll kind of jump into that a little bit. Obviously, we'll talk about recruiting because that seems to be something that we seem to be highly focused on. And then we'll talk about some of the other states and what they're doing in those types of states. We'll probably jump off at that point, I guess. It's probably as good a place as any. Grant's done a little bit of research as far as what's going on with the other states in regard to not just football, but other sports. So kind of give us an idea what you found out on that.
Yeah, there's only 5 states now that have officially said that there's no fall sports until, they delayed them until the spring. And that's just California, Nevada, Oregon, Virginia, and North Carolina, and then Washington, D.C. as well. But they're the only ones that have said absolutely no fall sports. And, Illinois actually is now the last Midwestern state to not have football. Minnesota just voted to have football and volleyball join their fall sports that are going on now. So Illinois is the last one to do it.
So you're seeing sports like cross country or...
Yeah, you're seeing like cross country, golf, tennis, sports like that are less contact being able to still happen during the fall. And in some states, while they move sports like soccer, volleyball, and football to the spring to try and, since they're more contact, hopefully COVID will be less of an issue by then.
Are they seeing, I'm sure that, again, they're non-contact sports, and a friend of mine, his daughter plays golf, and she's still doing, travel tournaments and things like that, or they have it's called something different, USGA or something, but, they can't even touch the pin. So when they go, they can't pull the pin. It stays in when they putt and things like that. I don't know if that's a part of the ruling prior to COVID, or if it's a COVID ruling, or so. Have you seen anything like that? In regard, I'm sure that there's, for like I think I mentioned in the past, for our practices, we have to take everybody's temperature, ask some questions. So did you see anything kind of leading up to how their competitions are? And
well, yeah, pretty much stuff like that's still going on, and obviously if you've been in contact with somebody, even if you have a good temperature, you're not allowed to participate. And actually, I saw something that was interesting that Washington, the article was in July, so I'm assuming it hasn't changed since then, but they created a 4-season schedule where they're having cross-country, golf, tennis, like that, starting beginning September. And then January, they have their winter sports, January 4th. Their spring sports begin on April 26th. And then their other fall sports that are being delayed, like football, soccer, and volleyball, would start March 1st. So they're having like a 4-season schedule. It's going to get really busy come January.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how like when we discussed on the last podcast, the ancillary difficulties that they're going to have in terms of, say, like officials. When you get these sports that share officials, I mean, we see it. We've actually, we'll actually see in our section, we'll see officials doing a volleyball game on a Tuesday or Thursday night, and then you'll see them on the sideline on a Friday night or on a Saturday game. And so when you start seeing these same officials that go from the fall sport, they do the winter sport, and then turn around and do the spring sport, when you condense multiple seasons into one sport, I think to the point that Chris made last week is you're going to see some changes in the way that these games get officiated. Baseball might have a plate umpire, and that's it. Football might go to a 4-man crew, or maybe even a 3-man crew, as opposed to the 5-man crew that they always had. It'll be interesting to see how they handle this, and if there is possibly a watered down in the level of quality of the officiating.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help but wonder how this is all going to work. I mean, I think it even as far as, the number of contacts, like we had, for baseball, we had 28, 29 contacts, and, we're starting to think about 21, 22 because there's so much. You need to leave some wiggle room. You don't know, for instance, I have a friend that's coaching football in Montana, and and they lost 4 of their starters this week, for a kid that was in contact with somebody that actually had COVID. None of the kids ever tested positive, but, that's going to be, you're going to have that. I mean, you're going to have things that are going to pop up that you just cannot control. You know, you're going to have an outbreak or, you know, something that's going to, and it may not be your school. It may be the school you're going to compete with on that Friday or Thursday or Monday or Tuesday or what have you. So, yeah, I think that, you know, and we talked about it last week again, you know, patience is going to be priority. You know, if we're not patient about this, and if we're not understanding about it, you know, I don't know if you guys saw it on Twitter, the lady who was at a football game, wasn't wearing a mask.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah, and gets arrested in the stands.
That was not only arrested, but I guess one way to put it, like violently arrested. That was sad to see. It really was. I mean, regardless of what your opinion might be on the wearing of masks and social distancing, that poor lady was there watching her son play football, and no other time in history are you going to be accosted for watching your son or daughter play a youth sport, but it happened.
Yeah.
And so, was she right? Was she wrong? We don't know the whole story, but it's a bad look.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I think we're in a position where, you know, you almost have to put your, you know, if you're doing, so here's my 2 cents on it. You know, this is about the kids. And if it's about the kids, you have to take your own personal stance out and do what's necessary to play within the confines of the rule. Now, maybe we don't know if she has some medical condition that prevents her from it. You know, I don't know. I mean, and I'm not even going to go there. You know, I think what we talk about with our kids, you know, on a regular basis is do whatever it's going to take to give you guys an opportunity to get back to some normalcy. Now, we talk about normalcy. It's not going to be anywhere near normal. I mean, we know that.
Yeah, absolutely not. And, you know, outside of, like you said, outside of the officiating, the way that, as coaches, you have to conduct yourselves with the players and the interactions that you have. And, you know, this last week, I kind of binge watched that Hard Knocks. Yep. They were covering the LA Rams and the LA Chargers, and kind of got a firsthand look of the different ways that the coaches have to communicate with their players. You know, half the time they're on Zoom meetings. So instead of having the position meetings where they're all in the same room, it's now, you know, a Zoom meeting where they're all on the Zoom, and then the coach is sharing stuff online. And I know that as a coach, you've done some of that already, and that's probably going to become a viable tool moving forward. Then the question becomes the way that the CIF monitors the amount of contact time that you have with your players. Are they going to have to establish rules on Zoom conferencing now? So, you know, there's a lot of unknown. It's going to be really interesting moving forward how that goes. But another point that I kind of got from watching the Hard Knocks was, well, not even the Hard Knocks, but just watching NFL football games this last week, is we've seen the penalties that they've imposed. The NFL has imposed on the coaches for not wearing their masks. Yeah, I think it's $100,000 because coaches weren't consistently wearing their masks. But I'm still scratching my head on how the coaches have to wear masks, but there are no players on the sideline wearing masks. And so, if it's gonna travel, maybe there's some science behind it that I don't understand. But that just seemed kind of odd to me to see that, and how that, if they're gonna require that in high school, will the coaches have to wear a mask? And in an athletic event, will the officials have to wear masks like they do in the NFL? So
yeah, we're seeing that. I mean, when we practice, we're supposed to wear masks, you know, when able, but you know, in 100-degree weather and all of that stuff, it's got a little bit better this last week, so it hasn't been as big of a deal. But you know, we try to keep our distance when we pull the mask off. You know, we're not standing right next to a kid, and you know, there's no physical contact, and you know, I mean, we got to be smart about it, and you know, it's real. It is what it is. I mean, Grant. Not to jump around too much, but Grant, we had an email this week. You want to kind of read that out and we can answer it, or?
Yeah, it said, what do you think about California not letting sports like cross country, golf, all the sports that are being played in other sports happen? They're not letting them happen during the fall.
So where do you stand on that? What do you think?
I don't know. It seems pretty successful in other states that cross country and golf and those kind of sports are in pretty minimal contact, so I don't see why they couldn't be fit in right now.
And you had said that we're down to 5 sports in the United States that are not allowing
5 states,
or 5 states in the United States that are not allowing prep sports.
So what do you think about California, like not letting it happen, since that's where we're at?
Well, we're seeing. We can take the example of the Pac-12, for instance. I think they just announced the other day they've rolled out a football schedule. I highly doubt that was rolled out because the powers that be felt like things are safer and we're going to move forward with this. I think that was more of a peer pressure situation because they were the only conference in the Power Five to not play football. And so if you kind of take that ideology and compare it to this situation where we have 5 states that aren't playing prep sports, at what point are they going to relent and allow the prep sports to move forward like the other states? Because we have, California being one of them, we have a model, multiple models on neighboring states that are moving forward and they're successful and they're keeping their infection rates down and use those models so that we can get the kids back on the playing field or in the gymnasium or whatever it takes.
I think the crazy part to me is that I think we missed a great opportunity for our kids to become more multifaceted in the sports that they play. I mean, if you figure you shut down the 3 primary sports, football, basketball, baseball, softball, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, I don't think there's much of an argument there that those are the 3 big ones.
Sure. And
then you have, your contact sports like wrestling and, some of those others that are going to require, a lot more contact that are, obviously they're going to be off. We're not going to be able to do that. But if you say, hey, none of those sports are open, but we're going to play golf, we're going to have swimming, we're going to have track, we're going to have cross country, we're going to have tennis. How many of the football, basketball, baseball type player is going to look for an outlet? They're going to look for something else to do, and maybe, and we talk about, creating well-rounded children, through education, through sports, through music, through art, through whatever. And so you have, you see it on a regular basis. You have professional athletes. Bernie Williams is a professional jazz guitarist, but was a World Series champion, I think, an MVP candidate. You have many of those people that are like that. So I think California missed a definite opportunity because those sports are not going to have any contact. I mean, and you're in a swimming pool where chlorine, I don't think that, unless I'm missing something as well, that chlorine, is the ultimate disinfectant. I don't think that we're going to have that much going on there. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, obviously. But I just feel like California could have done a better job in giving our kids different outlets that would have kept them more safe.
Yeah, there's no question. We're in a position now where we can look back and see what we've done up to this point, and then question, why did we do this? Why did we do that? But when this was a more fluid situation and we were caught in the middle of it, especially at the front end of this thing where, I can remember when this first came out and we first went on lockdown, it was kind of scary. It really was like, do I leave the house? Do I not leave the house? And now here we are 6, 7, 8 months out of it, and we're questioning, why can't we play football? So, the conversation has dramatically changed. We've got a lot more research behind what we're dealing with. I think for the most part, the numbers dictate a story that, for me, I think says that we should be doing prep sports. We should be playing football. We should be playing volleyball, because the numbers really show that the kids in those age groups are the least susceptible to not only, number one, get it, but number two, they overcome it better than anybody else. So,
and most of the time asymptomatic. So, we don't want to get into too big of a deep dive on that, but I just think it's crazy. I just think that, I think we could have done things a little bit better, I guess. I think it's a little bit difficult because nobody wants to be the person that, is the reason that a kid or a population gets infected, so there's probably a lot of fear, a lot of being overly cautious is even beyond fear, probably just trying to do the right thing, so and I don't know.
We don't want to, the damage that we're inflicting on the kids right now, high school's a tough enough time as it is, and I think having sports or maybe being part of the band or being part of, a performance and, an acting performance at the school or whatever, those outlets make those times easier. 'Cause it is. We've all been there. We've all been through it. And unfortunately, I think we're starting to see some higher rates of depression. This being Suicide Prevention Month, unfortunately, I think we've seen an uptick in that across the United States for the age group that we're talking about. Let's hope that's not a trend. Let's hope that gets addressed and people get the help that they seek. But I do think not allowing teenagers to do the things that they love to do and telling them no all the time, it has a really negative effect. I know it would have had that on me if I didn't get to do the things I did.
We had, growing up, that's your, and it's not just about sports. I mean, it's about, it's all those extracurricular opportunities that these kids have. And that's where they build friendships and, forge personalities and, they learn, to become who they become at some point later on in life. I mean, it's crazy to me how through time we've evolved into this kindergarten, first grade, all the way through 12th grade in the United States. So it's, and it wasn't something, I guarantee it didn't start that way, but it was like, hey, we need to add this. Hey, we need to add that. Hey, and now we've decided we don't need any of that stuff. And we're going to do, we're going to teach, we're going to teach on a video, that kids are just not used to. I mean, there's no hands-on learning that, and again, I think we're probably going to get into this rabbit hole that is just going to keep going further and further down, but it's just something that, it's so prevalent, and now you look at, sports in general. The NBA has bubbled, and they have very successful. The NFL, hardly any COVID tests are tested on a regular basis. They're not bubbled per se. But, they're cautious about the way they go about doing their business. And now you have baseball's about to start the playoff run, and they're going to bubble. I think after they get through the first round, I think they bubble the team and their families. And, I'm a big Dodger fan, so I read the news yesterday, and the Dodgers are paying for the families to stay, in the bubble. And it's just like, you have to do what you have to do at this point, and I think there's a lot of animosity. There's a lot of trivial, I guess, thought process that are going on with professional sports. For me, it's an outlet for not just myself. I mean, all these teenagers that we're talking about that don't have sports rely on college and professional sports as some form of entertainment. So I think it's important that we got back to it to have that for them to. We can't take everything away from them,
right?
we talked about suicide. That's probably it's definitely the worst thing that could happen. But you're talking about alcohol and drug abuse and use going up. You're talking about depressions, at multiple levels, happening. You're having, probably a lot of, we've seen a lot of quarantine weight being put on. Kids are just not being able to be as active as they are. And it's almost like
I'm putting on quarantine weight myself.
You and me both, brother. So, I mean, it is what it is. But it's just, I just think that the environment that we're in, and where we're going with this, it's going to require a lot of patience. It's going to require a lot of understanding, but it's also going to require a lot of give and take. And I feel like California has created this divided state that it's this way or it's that way. There's no gray area anymore.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because the people who are going to suffer are not the people that have any say, and that's
for sure.
I think we're going to have a generation of people that are going to, we're on month 8. I mean, with really no true end in sight for these kids. So we could potentially be looking at a whole year of missed school, and again, we're not just talking about the classroom. We're talking about the social aspect. We're talking about the developmental aspect, sports, extracurricular, all that stuff that goes into it. A whole year's been taken away from a child that's 15 years old.
That's right. It's a critical time for sure. And with all the negative aspects that have occurred out of this, it's my hope that when we come out on the other end, that there's some positives that we can pull from this as we move forward. But kind of to push the conversation ahead a little bit, you talking about recruiting to a certain degree. I've said this in the first 2 podcasts, and I'll say it again. We really want to hear from people that are being recruited. We want to know what the process is like. We got to hear from Gabby last week, who is now actually at the University of Oregon. She's already started training with the team, and as have a lot of other athletes that are in their first year of college. And so we want to hear from the high school athletes in the CIF in our Sac-Joaquin area. We really want to hear, if you've made a choice, if you've made a verbal commitment, what's going on with that. I think November 11th is our first signing date this fall. I think it's an early signing date for most sports. Is it the football signing date? Is that what's?
I believe it's the first, like you mentioned. If we all look back and we remember back, the Under Armour game and the National Guard game, that happens. Kids sign then too. Mm-hmm. So I think the higher recruits, they're not as worried about it. They have multiple offers, and so. But you're seeing commitments going on. Verbal commitments, obviously, are happening on a regular basis. Yesterday, a kid that my son throws with, got verbally committed to Cal Poly after he got offered the previous day.
Go Mustangs!
Yeah. So then you have, we have this crazy hotbed of athletes, and it's hard. It's like Scott said, we would love to talk to the recruited athlete, and it's easier for some of the sports. I'm highly involved in football and baseball in this area, but not so much in basketball, and on the women's side of things, I'm highly involved in softball, but not so much volleyball and basketball. So,
right.
We're going to have to figure out a way for us to get better at this as well, and finding a way to kind of find those athletes, those hidden gems. We have in football, just kind of to talk about the recruiting part, the number one running back in the 22 class was at Edison, and he transferred to Mater Dei, and so Ray Leak, yeah. And so he transfers to Mater Dei, but he's a Stockton kid, grew up in Stockton. And then the number one all-purpose back in the country is Jonah Coleman at Lincoln. And Jonah's got multiple offers all across the country as well. And the offers are starting to pile in. Then you go to Jaden Marshall at St. Mary's, one of the top receivers in his class in the country. And he's the top hurdler, I believe.
He's one of the top hurdlers, if not the top hurdler in the United States right now in his age group.
Yeah.
Following in the footsteps of his brother, who's at ASU.
Yeah.
He's at ASU now. And so, which that ASU is going to be I think a phenomenal track program here in the next couple of years. But yeah, for sure, there's a lot of talent that's coming out of this area. It's fun to watch. We're getting to watch athletes that are playing at the pro level now from this area. That it's super exciting to see. But with that said, we talked about some of the numbers last week in terms of what it takes to get from the high school level to the college, junior college, whether it's Division I, Division II, whatever. But some of the percentages, and I just kind of want to hit on maybe the big three that we were talking about: the basketball, baseball, and football. When we're looking at high school participants, and again, I think these are official NCAA numbers as of April of 2020, but I still think that there's some room for error in here in terms of, maybe not all the baseball players are playing high school sports and so on. But in baseball, high school participants, they have at 482,740. Of that number, only 36,011 move on to play in the NCAA, and they break it down further. So that's a percentage of only 7.5% of high school age baseball players go on to play in the NCAA. Of that, only 2.2% go on to play Division I, 2.3 Division II, and 2.9 at Division III. So realistically, your chances as a baseball player, and granted, there's a fair amount of high school baseball players that forego playing in college, and they get drafted or maybe they get picked up as a free agent in the minor league system by the professional teams. But I mean, that window or that amount of people that move on from high school to college is tiny. I mean, it's tiny. I think that's a great kind of look into how good you have to be to play at the next level. And it's putting in the extra time. It's doing things when other people don't want to do it. We've heard things, like it's more important to do things when nobody's watching than it is when people are watching. And I heard a quote the other day that said, and I don't remember who said this, and it was pretty awesome. It says, a light shines bright at night, or shines bright, and the light that shines bright at night shines even brighter during the day. And so, what I took from that was if you're doing things that nobody else is doing at a time when nobody else is doing them, that's just putting you that much further ahead.
Yeah, we see it. And you're in an elite conversation when you start talking about playing any athletics at the collegiate level. And then, at the professional level, it's an even different, a different group of people. And then the numbers become, extraordinarily low. Most people think, oh, my kid's going to get a scholarship, and not realizing that, the entire baseball program has 18 scholarships. The entire softball program has 13 scholarships or 15 scholarships or whatever it may be. And they've got to split that amongst, the baseball team. I think Gabby told me their Oregon baseball team has 60 guys or 50 something guys on the team. You're splitting.
And they have 18 scholarships.
You're chopping up 15 or 18 scholarships or whatever it is. And it's just like, and so, and I think that we have this huge misconception or misperception of what collegiate athletics are. I don't care what level you play at. NAIA, D1, D2, D3. It does not matter. If you make it and play at the next level, you've put in the work to earn that. Nobody's given anybody anything.
Right.
And those teams want to win just as bad as anybody else. And we're seeing collegiate baseball or JUCO baseball in California is off the charts good. You have JUCO programs that will beat half of the D1 programs in the country. That, and we know because we have a hotbed here with, not just Delta, which we've mentioned, because Delta's a phenomenal baseball outlet. Modesto's also a very good baseball program. You have, and then you start getting into the Bay with the Laney's and the Dalva Valleys and San Mateo's. That's a hop, skip, and a jump for us. But that Big Eight is what they call it. Mm-hmm. I think it's Sac City's included in that. I'm telling you that the winner of that division would probably be in the top 25 in the country, D1.
I could see that for sure. Yeah, and when we look at the rest of the men's sports that are listed here, so we've got baseball, basketball, cross country, football, golf, ice hockey, lacrosse, soccer, swimming, tennis, track and field, volleyball, water polo, and wrestling. And without actually getting the calculator out and crunching the numbers, I think it's safe to say, and we've heard this said before, but I think it's safe to say the percentage of athletes that will go on to play even at the Division I level is 2% or less. And so, if you want to be in that, if you aspire to be a Division I athlete, which I think is absolutely fantastic, I think everybody should aspire to that level. If you don't make it there, it's not failure. It's very competitive, but you're looking at 2% of all of these athletes, of these, millions of athletes. You're looking at 2% are making it Division I. And really, it's probably not that much higher at these other levels as well. So if that's what you aspire to, awesome. We hope you get there, but just know that if you think you're putting in enough work, you're not.
Yeah.
You're never putting in enough work.
There's never, in the classroom, there's never enough work being done. In the weight room, there's never enough work being done. On the field, there's never work. I guarantee you that if you're honest with yourself, you'll look back, the true athlete, the D1 athlete, even the professional athlete, or even the D3 NAIA athlete, if they really reevaluate their day. So this is what I did. I woke up at X time. I went to bed at X time. In between, this is what I accomplished. If you can really sit there and say that you put in 100% in those categories, like in school, weight room, and in practicing your craft, then you probably are either being dishonest with yourself or not. You don't know what the difference. And ignorance is bliss sometimes, and I think especially, when you're trying to get into, because what happens is that, Joe Smith, is playing football. He gets a scholarship offer because he's phenomenal. He does all the right things. He's super athletic or whatever. And then Bob Jones is sitting right next to him and he doesn't get the same scholarship, but he thinks he's just as good. And so instead of outworking his competitor, he just rests on his laurels and says, he's not doing it, so why should I? And the thing is that, when you can compete with yourself and not with anybody else, then you'll never stop working because you're always going to strive for perfection. I've read, we're reading the David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me book. And it's all about that. It's all about challenging yourself mentally and physically. And, when you're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, you know, you don't know what you're going to become, you know, and so sometimes we say, oh, I'm good enough now. Well, by the time it kicks in and you want to get better, you've been passed.
Yep.
You know, and you've missed the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And if you have put in that time and you do make it and you're part of that 2%, you get to where you want to be in terms of playing at the next level. And you're playing, if something doesn't go your way or you're not putting in the time at that level, the coaches are coaching for their jobs. You know, they're recruiting the best athletes they can get, but they're coaching for their jobs. And if you talent wise, you drop off or, you know, heaven forbid you go through an injury, you know, the coaches are going to put the best player in that position. So, I know for myself, when I was in college, I suffered an injury and I did everything I could to get back, because as soon as you suffer that injury, somebody else is taking your spot. And now you have to fight to get it back. Yeah. I have a daughter right now that's dealing with this very situation. And it's like I tell her, you have to have the mindset that you have to be the hardest working person on the team, because everybody else is going to put in the time, but you're putting in the time, plus you're overcoming some adversity as well. So, speaking of female athletes, let's kind of turn to that a little bit. And when we look at, you know, the NCAA statistics on some of the female sports. So we have basketball, cross country, field hockey, golf, ice hockey, lacrosse, soccer, softball, swimming, tennis, track and field, volleyball, and water polo. And we talked about last week when Gabby was here, we talked about softball a little bit, and you know, at the Division I level, 1.8, it's less than 2%. It's 1.8% go on to play at that level at Division I. But I was thinking maybe we could kind of look at volleyball for a few minutes.
Sure.
Because that's a really big sport in our area. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to have, you know, a university that's won a couple of national championships.
Small university too.
Yeah, and has gone in and you know, year in and year out is always part of the national conversation. Right now they've got, you know, Greg Gibbons is the head coach there. I think he's doing a good job. He does a good job of recruiting. I think, you know, at a school like that where you've got kind of a tight budget, it can be difficult, but he's been doing well there. But volleyball, so according to the NCAA high school participant wise, it's a really similar to men's baseball. There's 452,808 female volleyball players at the high school level. Of that, 17,780 move on to the next level. That's an overall percentage of 3.9%. But when you break it down by division, Division I is 1.2%, Division II is 1.1%, and Division III is 1.6%. And then, you know, what the NCAA doesn't track in these numbers here are also the amount of athletes that play at the junior college level. And I know in the state of California, junior college volleyball is extremely competitive. Delta's another, the volleyball program at Delta, much like the baseball program, is always part of the state conversation. I think they were in the Final Four 2 years ago, but it seems like they're always a state ranked team. So, you know, we've at Linden High School, we've been fortunate. We've had multiple state championships come out of there, and of those state champions, we've had not just a couple, but a bunch of girls go on to play at the NCAA Division I level.
Professional beach. And
yeah, exactly.
I mean, volley. So here's what I would say. Here's my 2 cents on this, because I have some familiarity with both. So baseball and volleyball are probably the two most predominant travel sports. I mean, you could probably add AAU basketball into that. But those two sports on a large scale, I mean,
at least when we're talking in our area.
Sure. I mean, because you're going to probably go into Minnesota or those types of states, and it's probably hockey, ice hockey, or lacrosse, or right. You just don't know. But so yeah, I misspoke. But in our area, you know, you have, and we talk there. It's 400,000 athletes, they say, that are playing at the high school level. 480, so almost 500,000. I would venture a guess that the number is closer to 1 million. I mean, just because I've been to, you know, these tournaments, these volleyball tournaments where, you know, it's like a cattle call. I mean, you're going every hour, every 45 minutes, it's like game on 15 courts, separated by a net, and they're just flying through games, and there's hundreds of teams show up at, at each level, if it's a national or a state tournament, and then baseball's the exact same way. We've traveled all over the country, Cooperstown and Vegas and Colorado. I mean, we've gone all over, to play baseball my boys were 12 years old and we go to Vegas to play and we stay at the Delano. I'm like, don't get used to this. If you play at the college or pro level, get used to riding a bus and staying in Motel 6.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think the numbers are so large, and I think, and the problem becomes is that when you have numbers that are that big, the cream that rises is they've separated themselves because they're competing against the best of the best.
Yeah.
So that's when, if you're a marginal player, you get exposed. Because the evolution of that player being around really good talent, you'll see a kid that's very athletic or very talented that starts to play travel sports, and within a year they've surpassed all of their teammates because they just didn't have the skill set.
Mm-hmm.
But once that skill set is developed and you're an athlete, watch out, you know. And that's where we saw the evolution of golf. Tiger Woods was the first real, I wouldn't say real athlete, but the first athlete that could probably transition to another sport. I don't know what that sport may have been, but he was super athletic, very high twitch muscle-esque, with a lot of, strength behind, pounded the ball.
Right. He was, I agree with you there, because we look at golf and one of the words that we don't use very often is athlete. I think that's dramatically changed now. And I think Tiger Woods had a lot to do with that. Like you said, he comes in and, I'm not taking anything away from any golfers out there. But Tiger Woods, it was the guy that was getting up every day. When he's playing in a tournament, he's out running a couple miles before he even goes to the driving range to hit balls.
Yeah, lifting
so he changed the way that golf was played to a certain degree, and he's obviously opened up the doors for a lot of minorities that otherwise didn't have those opportunities too. So he really grew the sport, and we're, I think travel, to your point, I think the travel, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, or not football, but a lot of these other sports, I think has really done a great job of growing our sport and increased the participation at the high school level. But we take those athletes, and the NCAA expands their research out even a little bit further, and they track the male athletes as they move on to the pro level. And so for example, we take those 36,000 baseball players that are in the NCAA that what they call are draft eligible, and that number goes down to 8,000. And then of that number, right around 1,200 are actual draft picks. Or of the actual draft picks of Major League Baseball, about 791 of them are from the NCAA. So when they break those numbers down, so going from being a high school athlete to college athlete, and then getting able to play pro ball, and I think that's major. At the major league level, or the AAA, AA, single A, whatever, that number goes down to 9.9%. But if you take that 9.9% and use it against that 2.2%, your chances of going from high school through college to playing professional baseball is way below 1%.
Yeah, and it is. You talk about, and the kids that are getting drafted out of college now. And the reason being the numbers are relatively low compared to the number of participants is that there's some qualifications. You have to play for baseball. If you go to a D1, you can't get drafted until your third year in college. If you go to a JUCO, you can get drafted right away. So you're seeing the NCAA numbers that play out. And yeah, it's, but it should be, you have kids that go to college and they're decent athletes, and no, you're not a decent athlete if you make it to professional sports. If somebody's paying you to play a sport, you're special. You're better than 1%.
There's no question. And here's a shocking number for you for female athletes. So obviously for female athletes, I think there's a I think there's a professional softball league out there. I know that there is a professional hockey league, and there's another one that's going to be rising up here pretty soon that I think actually will have some traction because it's getting endorsed by the NHL. And then you've got some stuff overseas. But if you look at women's basketball, and I talked about 399,000 high school women's basketball players. So if you have aspirations, if you're in high school and you're one of those 399,000 high school basketball players, and your aspiration is to play in the WNBA, guess what? 31 players move on each year from that 399,000 to play in the WNBA. And I'm not doing the math on that because I don't know that my calculator goes that low, but it's tough. And can it be done? Absolutely, it can be done. The name that comes to mind the most, because she was such a phenomenal basketball player in this area, I believe, was Jackie Gerlomus.
Yeah, Jackie Gemelos. I think she's back playing again.
Gemelos? Yeah. Sorry, I said the wrong.
She's
Gemelos.
back playing. She actually has had. It's way more than. I think it's more than 5 knee surgeries on between the 2 knees.
It would be awesome to hear from her. Her pathway has been.
It's been. I mean, and it's well documented. But yeah, and then you have Chelsea Gray.
Oh, absolutely,
MVP in that WNBA from St. Mary's.
She went to Duke, right?
Yeah, she went to Duke, and I think there's a couple of girls that are still playing now that have a really good chance. I know the girl that just graduated, I can't remember her last name to save my life right now, but from St. Mary's, was one of the number 1 recruit in her class coming out of 8th grade in the freshman year. And she's playing at a prestigious school as well. You know, St. Mary's was a basketball factory, women's basketball factory, and sent kids to Duke and UConn. And I think Jackie went to SC. So you have, these kids are just, and again, you go down to, AAU basketball, especially with the female level, I've been to some of these tournaments, especially when St. Mary's would host their big tournament, the MLK tournament, and they would bring teams from Vegas and LA and back east, and they'd come out and show up, and you would see the difference between a high school basketball player and a professional basketball player at that age.
Oh man.
It was crazy different. I mean, girls that not just their athletic ability, just their ability, the ability that they developed on their own with just sheer will, the ball handling skills, shooting, phenomenal passing. To me, men's basketball, boys basketball is all pure athleticism. You got guys that jump out of the gym, can shoot from half court, just great. But women's basketball is a symphony on the court. It's just, you have, the passing is better, the defense is better. You have a lot more pure of a game where it's not so, isolated dominant.
Probably more strategic, would you say?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, but then you have there was a girl a couple of years ago that played at McNair. She ended up going to Oklahoma State. She was 6'1" or 6'2" and could handle the ball better than anybody on the court. But she was also a head taller than half the team.
That makes a difference.
It was phenomenal to watch her play, because it was just like, and that you see those athletes, the LeBron Jameses at 6'9", and guys that can just flat. I mean, Anthony Davis is a 7-footer that can just handle the ball.
Yeah.
But to see, a high school, I think the first time I saw her play, she was 16 years old, and the first time I saw her play, I was like, golly, like how does that happen? At 16, I couldn't barely, walk and chew gum at the same time, and this girl just got skills beyond belief. So, yeah, I mean, I get it, I think that it's fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to look at it, but when you get to the level, the top level, you can say you've accomplished a lot.
Oh, there's no question, and we have, we've said this a couple of times during the show, but we have a pretty good amount of athletes that are coming from the 209 that are playing at the NCAA and beyond. So, as I think we're drawing this episode to a close, with that said, again, we really want as much feedback as we can get. We want to hear what you want to talk about. We're going to start having some in the next couple episodes. We've got some guests scheduled that we're going to be bringing in to kind of give their perspective on the status of the way things are. And as we move closer to the month of December, I'm excited to see things get going again. It's just right now, it's just a lot of rhetoric and a lot of, open discussions, and we're all crossing our fingers, but I'm being very optimistic and like I said, Chris he's going to give the contact information here again, but please reach out to us with anything feedback, good, bad, indifferent, questions you want asked. We want to hear it.
Yeah. Before we sign off, just bear with us. We're trying to grow this thing as, as organically and as wholesome as possible. We're trying to get, we'll be reaching out to some athletic directors in the area. Hopefully they can give us access to some players. And obviously we'd like to talk to athletic directors to see some of the things that they're going through at this point. So, if you are out there listening and somebody that, you feel like we should, reach out to, to get their viewpoint on some of this, you can reach us at prepsports209@yahoo.com. Again, prepsports209@yahoo.com. And then you can get us on Twitter at 209prep or on Facebook at 209prepsports. So again, Twitter's at 209prep and Facebook is at 209prepsports.
And we'll post the email on Facebook and Twitter today, so that you have that as well.
Yeah, we're hoping that this is providing a quality listening experience, and we're trying to give you guys what you want. We're trying to create a venue, or an area, or, a space for this genre for our kids to get the exposure that they deserve. That we're having a great time doing it. So, again, prepsports209@yahoo.com, at 209prep on Twitter, and at 209prepsports on Facebook. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.